Congratulations for making it all the way down here into the course. Now, you've went with the basics of the web scraping process, which is start off with inspecting your page, you go ahead and scrape the content, and then you go forward and parse that content, picking out the information that you want. This is a process that you will repeat for every website that you're working with and every website that you want to scrape. So keep in mind that this is like the high-level steps that you need to take, and that the actual specific code that you need to do, and obviously the inspecting and all of this is going to be individual for each of the websites that you're working with. Now, in order to give you some practice, you're going to look some more at the Indeed.com website, and I've assembled a couple of tasks for you, which will help you to practice your web scraping skills some more. Now, in this part, I want you to combine your knowledge about the site, the requests library, and Beautiful Soup that you've gone over in the past parts of this video course, and then tackle a couple of tasks. So the idea is that I want you to automate the scraping process across multiple results pages, because we're going to look at this in a second, but you've only looked at 10 or 15 results of the search, but there's more to that. And you're going to have to figure out how can you access multiple pages and get the results from all of those pages. Then I want you to generalize your code for varying search opportunities. Like you want your code to be able to search not only for Python in New York, but maybe you want to also search for Go in Berlin or whatever, just different locations and different search terms. So you want to write some functions to generalize the code and allow for different inputs. And then finally, in the parsing part, I want you to be able to target specific pieces of information, and I have some suggestions for which ones that could be, and then save that specific information out to a file so that you can also use it and maybe work forward with it. Now, let's look at this in the example start notebook that I have for you. And here we are in the notebook. So again, you have the high-level tasks written out here, and then more specifically, the tasks that I'm asking you to do. Now, I want you to scrape the first 100 available search results, because let's look at this some more. Here's the search results, but I think we counted them at some point before. It's 15 of those, but that's it. And then there's another page. So you can click forward and get more search results, because it wasn't just 15 results, but 3,414, right? So you want to be able to not only collect the information from the first page, but also from the second page, etc. So you're going to have to write some code to be able to do that. And I have a couple of hints for you in the inspect part of what you can look at in order to figure out how to do that. And I have some questions that can help you get on the right track down here in the inspect part. Then once you know how to get the 100 available search results, I want you to also generalize the code so that you're able to search for different locations and for different jobs. And then I want you to pick out specific information, which is the URL for applying to the job title, and the job location. Finally, save the results of your search to a file. Now, this notebook gives you a start for that. It mainly just contains the questions that can get you on the right track. And then you can just go in here and start typing your code. There you go. Make sure that you keep in mind the process that we talked about in this course. You want to inspect the page. Go over here, see what happens when you move to a different search result page. So what changes in the URL when you click that? Inspect. Use your developer tools to figure out what are the specific elements that you want. What is the ID, for example, or maybe a class name that defines where the location is noted on the page, etc. So just keep in mind that you have these tools in your tool belt now. You know how to inspect the page. Then you know how to use requests to scrape it. And then you know some of the methods that Beautiful Soup provides to pick out specific pieces of information. And go through this process, keeping in mind these specific tasks, and try to tackle them. You get a lot of additional training for doing web scraping, and to create a script that actually does something that collects information that might be relevant for you, or maybe one of your friends who might be looking for a job. Okay, so there is a solution document to these tasks, but I suggest you to go for it by yourself, try it out, see what you can do, and always you can compare with the solution document. But you know, the process of learning really is about trying to figure out stuff by yourself. Make sure that you check out the Beautiful Soup documentation, the requests documentation, get familiar with reading the docs. That will also help you down the line, and make this project your own. Look at what would be interesting for you to scrape from this job page, and really target the pipeline that you build out to that specific wish of yours. Now, before I let you go, let's go to the final video in this course, where we will do a full course recap and summary, because, you know, it's all about the iterative nature of working on things. So let's do a quick brush over everything that you went over in this course and everything that you learned. See you over there in the final video. Welcome to the sum up and recap to the Web Scraping with Python course. Now, in this course, you learned about web scraping using the Python programming language, and specifically requests and Beautiful Soup. These are two Python packages that you used in this course. And also you've been heavily making use of your browser and specific tools inside of your browser. Now, let's start off by talking about the first section of this course, about the intro to web scraping, where you learned what is web scraping in the first place, what are some common problems with it, and why would you want to use it in the first place. First of all, you learned that web scraping means gathering information from the web and that it generally means doing this in an automated manner. Like usually it's not about clicking a lot and copy and pasting, but instead writing some code that does the scraping for you. Next, you learned about what are some common challenges of web scraping. And there's two of them that you learned about in this course. The first one being variety, meaning that every website is specific. It's got its own structure. And if you want to scrape it, you're going to have to know what the structure is like so that you're able to address the specific pieces of information that you want. That just means every web scraping code you write is going to be specific to one website. And maybe you can reuse some parts of it, but generally every website is different. So also all of your code is going to have to be different. The second problem that you learned about is durability of web scrapers. And the reason for why they are usually not very durable is that everything constantly changes on the web. And once the structure of a website that you're working with changes, you will also have to change the code of your web scraper. Otherwise, it's just not going to work anymore. After that, we also looked at an alternative to web scraping, being an application programming interface or API that some websites provide. And it generally gives you back the data in a different format, for example, JSON or XML. And these formats are designed to be easily workable with a program. So it's not designed to be looked at, but it's designed to be consumed by a program. And as opposed to that, usually when you're accessing a page with your browser, then what you get back is HTML, which is designed to be viewed by a human eye. Now, not really the HTML that you see here in the background, but what your browser does with the HTML, this is what's designed to be viewed. You also learned that APIs is not what we're dealing with in this course, but instead, because many websites do not provide APIs, but just have this HTML that they're sending back, the web scraping that you're working with in this course handles HTML and how to get this soup of strings and information and pick out the pieces that you're interested in. And with that, you already moved on to part 1, which was about inspecting your data source. And the tools that you used for this were your eyes, your browser, and your developer tools. We started off by exploring the website. So that's really just going to the website like any normal user would and clicking around to figure out what happens, what is possible to do, which information is on the website. So that gives you a first look into what you might be interested in scraping from that website. Then you went ahead and learned about URLs and what information you can gather from looking at URLs. So while you're clicking through the website, you can see the URLs change, and there's a bunch of information that can be stored in query parameters at the end. You learned about how to decipher this information. And next, you dove even deeper by using your browser's developer tools and just inspecting specific elements of the page and seeing how they're represented in the document object model that lies at the bottom of the page and represents its structure and is more or less equivalent with the HTML that you're getting back. And after getting a good understanding of what does your website look like and what's the data you're working with, you moved on to part 2, which is about scraping the HTML content from a page. So getting the information into your code so that you can work with it programmatically. Now for this, in this course, we're using Python and the requests library, which is a very convenient way. It represents an easy interface for getting code from the internet. And the website that you're working with here, the Indeed.com website, is a static website, which means it gives you HTML back from the server directly, which makes scraping it much easier than some other examples. So we also looked at some other examples later. But let's start off with the static website. Here you can see some code, and you can see it's very concise because requests has such a nice interface that doesn't need a lot of lines of code to get the HTML back into your code. This is all you need, 3 lines of code, and this gives you the HTML to work with. Now, there's other situations that you might run into. For example, you might want to scrape information that is hidden behind a login, and you would need to authenticate first. And you learned that this is possible with the requests library as well, but we didn't go into detail in this course. And then another example you can run into is a dynamically generated website, meaning that what you get back is JavaScript code, and your browser needs to execute this JavaScript code in order for it to construct the HTML that actually represents the information on the page. Now, you learned that requests is not the right tool if you're running into a situation like that. And you also learned that there are tools out there for this, and one example is Selenium. And so if you encounter a website like this, you know which direction you should go forward and look at. But we didn't go into this in this course. And after you have the information in your script, you scraped the page. Now it's time to parse the HTML in order to pick out the pieces of information that you're interested in. And in this course, we did that using Python and the Beautiful Soup library. Now, I'm not going to go again over the code snippets here, but you learned about how you would find elements by a specific ID, how you could find them by an HTML class name, or also how you can extract the text from an HTML element, as well as how you could extract the attributes. In our example, this was the URL from a link element from an HTML element. And what I want to stress in this part is that it really is a very iterative process, and that you should always just keep in mind that you can switch between your browser and your developer tools to inspect a bit more what is the exact item that you need, where you want to get the text from, for example, and then switch back to your code and write the necessary pieces, run it, see what comes out there, and keep refining it by switching between these two different tools that you have. And in this final section, I introduced you to a Jupyter notebook with a bunch of tasks for you that lead you forward in working more with the Indeed.com website in order to gather more practice doing web scraping, both the scraping aspect as well as the parsing aspect and the inspecting, all of the parts that are important. And I hope that this is going to be interesting for you to work on personally and just pick out the pieces that you're interested in and just train your web scraping muscles more so that you get familiar with working with these tools and then move on to scrape whatever you're interested in scraping from the web. Now, as a quick recap of the recap, essentially, I just want to say, keep in mind the iterative web scraping process, which is start off inspecting, scraping, and parsing. It consists of these three pieces, and the inspect part is an important one. You need to understand your website in order to be able to work with it, in order to be able to scrape and parse it. And for this, I want to stress that every page is special. So you really just need to get in there and understand first what is the structure, what is the information you want, and how are you going to be able to get it. And with this, I want to say congratulations again for making it all the way through the course. I hope you enjoyed it and that you learned something about web scraping and that you know how to work forward and get some more practice. And keep in mind that it's all about training your skills. And if you keep training, that you're going to get good at web scraping. And that's all. I hope to see you in another course. Have a nice day.